Hey, Javier here with a new look at my Unity plugin in Development XQ. This is a breakdown of how easy it is to use XQ to queue up and control sound playback in Unity without having to touch any C#. Those familiar with theatre show control systems like QLab or CSC might recognize some similarities. I actually made this for a theatre company I was working with who were making an audio play with branching narratives in Unity for Android. So that they could control it without having to learn to be programmers. In this video, I'm going to show a couple of ways of using XQ and triggering them only using Unity UI buttons. It's still in development, so it's a bit rough around the edges, but I wanted to show what I've been working on in the technical side of sound design. As I mentioned, XQ is mainly directed at people who are new to coding, so I'm going to keep it simple. But if you're entirely new to Unity itself, you might want to have a play around on the tutorials before jumping in on this. So here's the Unity window. On the left, I've got my sounds. They're all lined up. Ambiances, a couple of bits of music, and some one-shots. To the right of that is my hierarchy. This is where things are placed in the game world. There's very little in this scene at the moment. The canvas, which displays the UI that you can see here in the middle, and then my XQ hierarchy. The XQ game object here that I've selected just contains the top-level XQ manager script, which is needed for the system to work and has no configurable parameters. And then I have two child objects, XQ atmospheres and XQ one-shots, which I'll be using throughout. Each of these contain two components, a QList script and an attached QTrigger script. I'll show these off in a sec, but briefly, the QList component is what we use to create and control actions on named audio source components. So that's the bulk of the front end for how the XQ system works. And the Q trigger exposes a really simple way to control a Q list by letting us move sequentially through each action. So for example, let's say we want to program the underscore for an interactive visual novel, ambiances, music, blah, blah, blah. We want to move through the different states. We know the order that we're going to move through them, but the player might linger on each one as they read the text or interact with objects in the scene. So let's say we're going to do the main menu now, where the player enters the game. The story is set in a forest, so let's get some birdsong in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new game object with an audio source component already attached containing birdsong. To do this, we can simply drag in the audio clip. Oh, that was set to autoplay. Birdsong. What we can do is just drag this in to the project hierarchy, and it will automatically create an audio object, and it's helpfully named it the sound of the sound clip. So let's just drag this into the sounds folder that I'm using here just to make it all neat. So now let's add our first cue. We can add a play cue. We can just add a play cue and then drag the created audio object here to target it. And that should basically be it to line it up in the most basic way. Let's test this. So I've got here. So this cue that we created is called a play cue. A cue is a specific action done to one sound. So we have play cues, fade cues, and stop cues. Each of them have different options that you can configure in the inspector. So we're going to go through them. So the first one is common to them all. This is called pre-wait time. It basically holds the execution of this action for a given number of seconds. This is absolutely essential when for more complex actions, because you could, for instance, wait until another clip has finished fading out to play the next one. The play cue also gives us the ability to loop the clip, which, given that we want ambiances, we should turn on. So let's do that. The output volume sets the overall volume of the clip, and you can use the starting volume to set the starting volume. In XQ, you might notice that I'm using decibels here. So this is going from a range of 0 to -70 here. For those not familiar, decibels measure loudness in a way that is closer to how we perceive it. So they're more intuitive to use than amplitude and easier when controlling fades. The last thing here is playback speed. So this allows you to play back the clip quicker or slower, which also affects pitch. So right now, as you might have noticed, the birdsong just plays at full volume as soon as it starts, which sounds a bit horrible. So let's try and fade it in. Let's add a fade cue, target it to that, By the way, notice how the name of the cue changes automatically to reflect its type and target. This means that if you want to collapse it using the drop-down arrow, you can easily see which cue is which. You can also change it if you like. Let's change this one to fade in, birdsong. So we want to leave the target volume at 0 because that's full. That reminds me, let's go and set the starting volume of this to minus 70. We can set the duration of the fade using fade time. So let's just leave it at 3 seconds. And now the sexiest bit of the whole XQ system is the curve shape parameter. That lets us adjust how quickly the volume changes over time. By default, it's what we've got here, which is what's known as an S-curve, so starting and then ending gradually. If we drag the slider to the left, we get it starting slowly and then speeding up, which is an exponential curve. This is how sounds attenuate with distance in real life. So if you want to make something sound like it's physically coming closer, this is a good one. And if we drag the slider to the right, we get it starting quickly and then slowing down as we get closer to target volume, which is a logarithmic curve. This is great for fading between two sounds, especially music, because you don't get a dip as the first one fades out and the second one fades in. For this, let's just leave it at a S-curve. Cool. Let's see if that worked. Great. Perfect. So something that might be confusing you at this point is because you might not have expected them to play at the same time, so the fade is happening at the same time as the play. That's because each of these cues is actually grouped within another class called the X cue. All of the cues within an X cue are fired simultaneously, remembering, of course, that we can delay execution for each cue individually using the pre-wait time. What we've been firing now is one single lonely X cue. So let's give them a friend. We can create a new X cue by selecting the X cue and pressing the plus button at the bottom of the cue list. Note that the plus currently duplicates the selected X cue because that's how Unity's interactable lists work. Let's just get rid of these so that we can start the next X cue fresh. To delete the cues, we can use the minus button at the bottom of the X cue. So the next step in our visual novel is an introduction to the world. So let's add some music. So let's find something. What about this? And we can imagine that maybe there'll be just some descriptive text about the story that we're about to discover. So we want this to fade in over the top of the bird song. So let's basically repeat what we had before. So let's drag it into the hierarchy, put it into the sounds folder. Again, we don't need to do that. That's just to make it neat. Let's add a play and a fade, and let's target both of these to here. We want it to loop. We want the starting volume to be minimal, and let's have a slightly slow fade time and a little bit of a logarithmic entry. So let's give this a go. So we should start with nothing, then here's some bird song. And we hear the music fading in. Great. So let's just go straight ahead. Our next scene is in a cave. So this is a chance to create a crossfade. So it's changing between two environments. So let's make a new X cue. So I just deleted that with the delete key. First off, we want to fade the two tracks out. So let's create some fade cues. So we want to fade birdsong and pluck music, set the target volume to 0. Let's say we want this over 10. Let's use a stop cue to stop them once they're done. So we've got here, let's say the birdsong stops and the music stops. So currently this is all going to go at the same time. So we can use a pre-wait time to delay by the amount that this is fading out. And so then that will wait for 10 seconds, which will be when the fades are done, and then the tracks will stop. The stop cue only has one unique option, which is a pause clip, which basically means that if you call play again on this sound, it will start playback from the point at which you paused. If pause clip is unchecked, it will restart the sound from the beginning. So for this, we're not going to need it to be paused. So let's just leave it as it is. Let's just check that's working. Birdsong, music, and everything should fade out. Great, awesome. And by the way, this might be a good time to just show that each of these actions prints to the console. So we're able to see exactly what's happening. We see here that we're waiting for 10 seconds, we're delaying a fade, then triggering stops, and then 10 seconds later we've got to stop. So let's bring in our cave ambience. So we've got two ambience tracks here, cave drips. Oops, can't remember how to use my own system. Cave drips and cave tone. Great. And for each of these, we're going to want them to fade. So drips, tone. I tend to always group similar cue, or the cues that are targeting the same object together, just because it makes it a little bit easier for me to understand what's happening. It can be a little bit unintuitive at first, separating the fades from the plays rather than, for instance, integrating a fade into the audio clip. But once you get used to it, it starts to make sense. So as ever, loop starting volume 0. That how long would this? Let's say 10 for this and 6 for this. Why not? And then maybe we could also add. Let's add a drone as well. Have we got a drone? That's a drone. Sounds, metallic drone. Go to here. Go down to the bottom. This. Let's have it fade in over 15. Let's have this wait a couple of seconds. Bring in, maybe 15 is too long. Let's not go crazy. Yeah, a bit logarithmic. And that should be good. So let's play this through and see how it sounds. So we've got birdsong, music, and now we should have the crossfade. Great. So we've got quite a lot of cues here. So let's so we'll collapse them and show that we've got the names here so we can see what they're doing. We could even collapse the X cues as well, which gets really useful if you've got much more longer cue lists. So let's give them names so we know what this is. So let's say this one is fade in birdsong, add music, crossfade to cave. We need to fade. Let's fade them all out actually. So let's make this final one. So we've got all these cues here because it's duplicated it. We could delete them and start again. Or we could just edit the ones that are already there and it just saves us a few clicks. So we don't need any of the play cues. So we can get rid of them. And then let's see what we've got. So we've got the two cave ambiences and the metallic drone going on. So let's do the cave tone first. So we've got here target to 0. Let's do these at 5. Let's make this a more tasty curve. Like we're leaving the place. And then here, what was that tone? So this one would be drips. Like that. This one can go relatively quickly because it's just, the drips can just stop. And then let's just get rid of these, create a stop cue for the drips. Sorry, for the drone. That. So we want to fade drone to 0. over 5. And again, one of these. Oh, let's do it a bit longer. Whoa. Whoa. Like that. And we're going to stop this at 8. I think I didn't do the pre-wait times on this, so let's just check that. Nope, I did that. Oh, I see, but yep, I haven't timed it right. So that's 1.1. This one is over 5, so let's make this 5. And this one is fade all out. So let's see if this goes. Bird song. That's why we're adding the music. Go into the cave. And fading them out. Beautiful. So you can see here we've got a really quick system to be able to put together the different cues. The interface lets you see pretty clearly what's happening, and you can start building quite complex effects. So you don't have to look at the whole thing by itself because you can just collapse them all, name them. The names here are exposed to code, so you can use them to trigger other stuff, which is how I'm displaying them in the UI here. Actually, let's talk about the UI. So currently the QList object doesn't trigger the XQs by itself. It just holds them. It receives a call to play a specific XQ number or index, which corresponds to the order in the list in the inspector. So in this order. So it will say, I want to play XQ0, I want to play XQ1. So the play next button that we've been using is connected to this Q trigger script, which I mentioned earlier, which simply goes through the actions in the Q list. It just loops through them, which I think is included. I may bundle this into the functionality of the Q list as well. So if we just look at, so this is our next button that we're looking at here. To connect the XQ actions to UI objects, you want to find the onClick event, or whichever event you're going to use, and then use this to add a new action. Target the game object with the component that you want to affect. So in this case, we're doing this XQ atmospheres, and then you can find through the drop down, you can find the component that you want to communicate with, and this one is triggering the next Q function here. This is also how I'm updating the text here with a script on the text, which reads what the Q trigger is doing as well. So a key part of the XQ system is that you can have multiple Q lists at once. This allows us to leverage some different bits of QList functionality. Rather than just running through them sequentially, we can do other stuff. So in our visual novel example, let's say we want the player to be able to interact with a couple of objects in the scene while they're going along. We can use a Q list to contain these sounds and reference them directly with a button press. So I'll just unhide these buttons. Ta-da! So we've got some extra buttons here. Let's bring some audio clips
Welcome, traveller. You're going to enjoy this.
Okay, great. Let's bring these in, put them in sounds. So then we've got a separate Q list here. Let's make one XQ boop, 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 with a play cue, and we can copy that out. So we've got 3 different options here. Why they're all collapsed. So let's say the first one is you're going to enjoy this. Then you've got welcome traveller, and then we've got a SX boom. So here we've just got only one Q for each XQ. So let's just so we know what's going on here. Great. So here we've just got some simple play cues. Using the Unity UI button, as we used before, we can match each button's onClick event to an action in the Q list. So if you go to the one-shots thing, instead of going to its Q trigger, we can access the Q list directly, and then check the play XQ method. This one just takes an index which just correlates to 0, 1, or 2. We've got the listing here. So let's say this first one, VX1, we wanted to play You're Going to Enjoy This. So we go down here, and that's already on 0. And then 2. They're going to play number 1, I believe. Yep. And then the boom, we want to play number 2. Let's give that a go. And for good measure, let's have some birdsong and music here.
You're going to enjoy this quite a lot.
Oh.
Welcome, traveller. You're going to enjoy this quite a lot.
Oh, we're in a cave. Oh.
Welcome, traveller.
Yeah. So in this specific case, you could just trigger play or play one shot on the audio sources themselves from the Unity UI, but by setting it up in this in the queue system, it means that you can create more. You can set up more complex behaviors, or so we could have layered sounds, or create a fade in, or we could set it to pause and then resume a sound, or whatever. And having all of the actions and references within the queue lists mean that they're much easier to see than having them on individual audio sources. Fundamentally, you need to do what's best for the workflow and for the project, but this is a useful option for people who are more familiar with the idea of queuing sounds and fades linearly, or who don't want to have to learn code for to use Unity for things like audio plays, narrative, small narratives. So that's all. Let me know if this is useful, what functionality you wish it had. This is still in active development that I come back to every now and again. I'll leave a link to the repo if you want to try it out as it is, but be warned that it is definitely rough around the edges. So thanks for watching. If you're interested in finding out a bit more about my work, my name is Xavier Velastin, and my website is here on the screen. And you can find out more about my work as a sound designer. If you head back to my regular website, you can find out more of my work as a sound artist and technologist. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Welcome, traveller. You're going to enjoy this